Hello, first graders. My name is Mrs. Needleman, and I'm going to be reading a story to you today about an amazing architect named Antoni Gaudi. This is a true person who lived in Spain, who was just an amazing, incredible, unique, and creative architect. And but this story is a little bit different than our traditional nonfiction books because it's kind of an idea of what he might have had, what might have happened to him in a day. So there will be some true facts that you hear in this story and some other just ideas about what the author thinks Mr. Gaudi might have spent his day doing. So this story is called A Stroll with Mr. Gaudi. Mr. Gaudi leaves home early for work, as he does every morning. It's a chilly day, brr, he utters, as he pulls his hat down over his ears. He warms his hands with his breath, buttons up his jacket, and starts to walk. Antoni Gaudi lives in a pink house in the middle of a park that looks like an enchanted forest made of stone. He goes down the steps that leads to the exit and greets his friend the dragon, the guardian of the park. "See you later, my dear friend," he says, raising his hat. "Look after the park until my return. I must hurry. I don't want to be late for work." The multicolored dragon replies with a smile to this ritual, which is repeated every morning. Meanwhile, Mr. Gaudi quickens his step and walks down to the city. Like every morning, the streets are bustling. Horse carts are urged on by shouts from their drivers. Trams packed full of passengers screech, and bicycles fly along at great speed like swallows, negotiating the traffic. Mr. Gaudi walks along, not paying attention. He's rather absent-minded, and he sometimes bumps into other pedestrians or crosses the road without looking. "Careful there! Look where you're going!" shouts a cyclist. Can you find Mr. Gaudi? To passers-by, Mr. Gaudi resembles a white-bearded beggar lost in thought. Some of them even step out of the way, fearing he might ask them for money. You'd never imagine that this is Barcelona's most famous architect. Thanks to his imagination, some of the city's most original and emblematic buildings have been created. He has also designed monuments, lampposts, benches, and even paving stones. Yet today, like every other day, he goes along his way, absorbed in his thoughts. Nobody recognizes this taciturn old man as he walks by. Mr. Gaudi arrives at Casa Mila, an apartment building that he has completed recently. Like all of his projects, Casa Mila looks like nothing ever seen before. Resembling an enormous mountain of stone, its curving silhouette looks like something out of a dream or a fairy tale. Nonetheless, many people find this building extremely ugly, claiming that it looks more like a quarry than a block of flats. Thus, its nickname, La Pedrera, which means quarry in Catalan. This morning, Mr. Gaudi is at Casa Mila, trying to calm down some residents who aren't at all happy with their new home. "Look here, Mr. Architect," says a lady. "You may be a genius, but with these curved walls and ceilings that look more like a cave than a flat, it's impossible to furnish or hang a picture. And what about my grand piano? It doesn't fit in the music room. Can you tell me where exactly I'm supposed to put my piano?" "Madame," answered Mr. Gaudi with his eyebrows raised, on the verge of losing his patience, "I suggest you try playing the violin." After an hour of listening to complaints, the old architect's head is about to explode, and he goes up to the roof terrace for a bit of air. He breathes deeply and sits down on a step. "People who are so conventional drive me mad," he murmurs, while he watches the flight of the pigeons in the sky. Why is it so difficult for them to let go of their prejudices and open up their imaginations? "Right, off to work. We've wasted enough time this morning," he says to himself as he gets to his feet. Mr. Gaudi heads out into the street and starts to walk. munching along on some of the hazelnuts that he normally carries in his pocket. A few blocks away from Casa Mila, the biggest project of his life is being built, a church called La Sagrada Familia, the Church of the Holy Family. It will be as big as a cathedral and as tall as a skyscraper. The old architect arrives at the Sagrada Familia and goes down to the workshop. There, his collaborators update him on the building's progress. For those who don't know him well, Mr. Gaudi may appear to be the most difficult and chaotic architect in the world. Rather than sketching plans on paper, he prefers to illustrate his ideas with handmade cardboard or plaster sculptures. Sometimes he sets up models made of cables, ropes, and hanging weights, and uses mirrors to visualize his designs right side up. He often arrives at the worksite with new ideas and changes the project on the spur of the moment, almost on a whim. Nonetheless, his assistants, workers, and craftsmen, who've known him for many years, have learned to interpret his ideas, transforming them into stone, brick, mosaic, or wrought iron, until they become, finally, works of art. As evening falls, Mr. Gaudi tries to talk to Joseph Maria Jujol, one of his closest collaborators. The young architect puts a question to him that has been worrying him for some time. Master, the construction of the Sagrada Familia is going well. Soon we'll finish the first towers, but have you considered that this may take many more years to complete this great work? Clearly we won't live to see it finished. My dear Jujol, I know who I'm working for, and my client is in no hurry. The Sagrada Familia, how do you think the cathedrals of the past were built? The Sagrada Familia is a project that will span several generations, and each one will help to enrich its splendor. While it's true that we can only begin it and allow others to finish it, one day it will be completed and it will be a joy to see. The Sagrada Familia will be the pride of Barcelona, I can assure you. This evening, Mr. Gaudi can't linger because he has arranged to have dinner with his friend Count Goel. After giving some final instructions to his colleagues, he puts on his hat and says goodbye. Rushing off to meet his friend, his head full of ideas, he crosses the road again without looking and has the second near miss of the day. "Watch where you're going, mister," shouts the traffic guard. Dazed, the old architect stammers out an apology, gets onto a tram, and heads to the upper quarter of the city. This is another one of Gaudi's buildings. Count Eusebi Goel is Mr. Gaudi's only neighbor in the park where he lives. In fact, Count Goel is the park's owner, and his name is written in large letters and mosaics at the entrance. Park Goel. With his fortune, he has financed many of Mr. Gaudi's projects, although he often asks himself if he's not becoming as eccentric as his old friend. He sometimes wonders whether the architect's outlandish designs will eventually ruin him. When they built Park Goel some years ago, the Count wanted to create a residential area for the rich, full of luxury mansions, but nobody was interested in his idea of a garden city. Now, just he and Mr. Gaudi live in this solitary park. That's where it says Park Goel. Seated on the bench that snakes around the square, the Count lets out a melancholy sigh. "Antony, my friend," he says, "we must yield to the evidence that this park will never be what I hoped it would be. Between those who think it's too far from the city center and those who detest your architecture, of the 60 plots up for sale, only one has sold." "You are right, Don Esoby," answered Mr. Gaudi. "I'm afraid that you and I are the only people who like my architecture." "Well, now I'm not saying that I love it, but I certainly respect it," replies the Count, getting to his feet. After walking for a while in silence, Count Goel turns to his friend, strokes his beard solemnly, and declares, "Let's say no more, Antony. We're going to forget about the garden city that will never be, and all those rich people who'll never come to live here. I'm tired of seeing this park so empty. This marvelous place wasn't built for two solitary old men like us to live in alone. I've decided that Park Goel should become a public park where children can play, families can enjoy themselves, and everyone who comes to Barcelona can visit." "An excellent idea, Don Esoby," responds Mr. Gaudi enthusiastically. The two friends dine together in the Count's mansion. Whilst Don Esserby tucks into a feast, Mr. Gaudi, a vegetarian, is happy to eat a green salad and some steamed vegetables. The evening hours quietly pass, and the two friends continue their endless conversation, recalling memories of their youth and imagining new projects that will never come to fruition. Just between the two of us, Don Esserby, do you know what my great dream as an architect is? Says Mr. Gaudi with a look of complicity. I would like to construct a monumental building in New York, the city of skyscrapers. Don't laugh, dear friend. I even have the plans drawn. Ah, America, the new world, exclaims the Count, a smile lighting up his face as he imagines the land where his father made his fortune many years ago. It is late when the two friends part. On his way home, Mr. Gaudi stops to say goodnight to the multicolored dragon. Here I am, my friend, after another dinner with the Count, trying to put the world to rights, as usual, but we know that our time is coming to an end. One day, in the not-too-distant future, we'll be history, and you'll still be here guarding the park for the generations to come. Good night, dear dragon. May Providence be with you. The moon and the stars shine in the sky above Park Goel. Mr. Gaudi walks toward his house, lost in thought, imagining new buildings in his head. He designs arches, domes, vaults, and columns. However, as he glances up at the full moon, he stops in his footsteps, and the distant memory of a young love that wasn't to be invades his thoughts. For a moment, he seems to feel a pang of melancholy, but he quickly pulls down his hat, quickens his step, and enters the doorway. Tomorrow it's back to work, and there is so much to be done. And this is a picture of Antoni Gaudi, the real architect, and some of the buildings that he made. This was the one that I pointed out in the story before. This is a picture of Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and this is a real picture of the real building, Casa Mila, also known as La Pedrera, that's in Barcelona as well. I hope you found this book interesting, and that you go ahead and learn more about Antoni Gaudi. That's a picture of the dragon that's at the entrance of Park Goel. I hope you enjoyed today's book, and I look forward to reading you more nonfiction books in the future. Toodles!